Plated Traditions channel. Welcome to the Plated Traditions channel with your host Kendra Moses. This is the Plated Traditions.
Hello and welcome to the Plated Traditions channel. My name is Kendra Moses. As always, we have our resident chef Kai off camera. Now this week, and again, like I said last week, we talk a lot about traditions because play traditions. And this will be a constant thing. And a lot about tradition has to do with a particular word that I think really encompasses it all. We talk about etiquette. So this week, yes, you guessed it, we're still talking about etiquette. By now, it seems like it shouldn't be. It should be over by now. I get it. I really get it. Just don't be a prick when you're walking about. Just don't be a prick when you're eating with someone at the table. Yes, that is basically the gist of it. But there's a few more things I think we should cover still today in regards to etiquette. Now, I want to get back to the plated part of etiquette. The plated part of etiquette, of course, is the food. Now, when we're going and we're eating with one another, and especially if we're eating with someone that we're familiar with on a social level. So you've already gotten together a certain level of respect and etiquette for someone because it was just simple interactions then. There was really no food involved. And even if there was food involved, there probably was a more laid-back situation in which you were eating, where you had a collective group of people who just got it in their head that said, well, we're all out. We're not going to be that focused on what we typically do at home or with our families, our elders, people who expect us to do certain things. And even if there was an expectation of theirs, they're just doing a compromise and saying that, yeah, it's not that important. I'm not going to worry about it. And at the very most, you might just hear differences when it comes to when it's time to eat. I find it fascinating that there's so many different ways to basically initiate the start of eating, like bon appetit. My grandmother, they said her 5 children, they had different friends. They went to different people's houses sometimes. And at that time, the community was quite diverse. They had Germans, they had Jamaicans, they had all types of people, and they brought their food from wherever they came from. They would come directly from their motherlands. And they lived in the United States at that time. They lived in that neighborhood in that time. But my mother said she was always surrounded by all types of faiths, all types of people hailing from all types of countries and everything else. But she has all those memories that she shared with me about going to the Jewish people's stores to get all types of cookies and foods and things like that. And have the neighborhood being filled with the smells of all these different foods from basically places from around the world, just in one little plot of land where they were. And the people were more hospitable then, too. And so they would be inviting. There's a couple of things to think about for this. Now, that's again when the table etiquette and the cultural etiquette of just coming into someone else's home. That's where it plays a part. So my grandmother made a point to tell her children to always be mannerable and mindful of these things. And she told them, now, their food and their cuisine may be a bit different than what you're used to. If you see something there that you know you don't like, or you see something there that you're not sure of, politely and truthfully said, no thank you. Hopefully, no thank you will suffice. But she said at that point in time, please don't be disrespectful in the sense of sitting down at their table and then not sincerely partaking in their food. And I believe that's something that transpired in my mother. Then that's why when it came down to me and my siblings, it was, you could try something, but if you don't like it, I'm not going to hold it against you. And so, because there were things that she came across, especially at a young age, young children in particular are notorious for being known for being picky and finicky eaters. And at that time, there were certain pungencies when it came to the spices, and there were certain animals that were being used in these cuisines that they weren't familiar with. And so my grandmother did not want to deter them at all from experiencing these different cultures and experiences, but she also didn't want her children to be held to a certain expectation of partaking in food that they probably would not like. And she also did not want her children to be disrespectful in any way in regards to receiving such food. So her basic rule for the sense of etiquette in this point was that when it comes to dinner time, if you are not sure if you want to partake in that food, politely and genuinely excuse yourself and you come back home. Basically, the main thing you might come into contact with in these group situations where everyone decided to just relax, let their hair down in order to break bread with one another. So we're not thinking about all those etiquette involved things that would be if you were in each one of their personal homes. You're just out and about. And so you still have that level of etiquette and respect for one another, but you're just breaking bread. You're just eating together. And so in this point in time, you may not see every little intricate piece of what they typically do in their homes, be it because, like I said, their own intense personal beliefs, or because maybe even more so because they're around their elders or people who really have an expectation of etiquette when they're at their table. What interests me is that during this time, while you might not see all the little intricacies of etiquette, you may hear things that they still feel the need or the compulsion to do. There is a simple kind of human reaction that we have. So like we were about to engage in a drink or a meal. You might hear things like Prost or Bon Appetit, or you may hear Slanche or Guten Appetit, or you might hear Bismillah. Even though these different phrases come from different places, they still have the same basic intention, wishing you goodwill for the food and or drink that you're about to partake in. And that in itself is a example of etiquette. You feel the meaning behind it every time it's said. Because every time it's said with a certain facial expression, a certain smile. And hopefully what will happen most of the time when you receive such a salutation of etiquette for your food, you have a good eating experience. We find ourselves back in our own little individual places. We find ourselves going instinctively back to the traditional way of doing things, especially, like I said, if it's a deep personal belief system you have, or something that you know you have to do everything like grandma, mom, whoever is your elder expects or taught you to do. And so it's not a pain, it's not anything else like that. It's just something you know it's going to be a different experience. You may well have to bow your head at the table. You may well have to hold hands before you partake in a meal. And these are the things that you want to make sure that as a visitor to someone else's home, just remember that when you are in your own space and you do have some form of, I guess, organizational expectation or organizational habits that you have, just presume that whoever you're going to visit may have the same thing. When you're visiting someone, do so with the expectation of learning. You may feel like you know everything about this person, but you have never really had a really personable meal with this person or with their loved ones. And so know that that situation may be different. You may feel like you know everything about them. You may feel like you have a phone number or speed dial that makes you really close. But to see someone in a different atmosphere will tend to show you that you don't quite know everything. And that's not a bad thing, and it's not something that is like a bad indication or anything else. It's just that people have their own ways of doing things in different parts of their lives and different times and places in their lives. And if you're not a literal shadow, you're just someone who you feel is very close to this person, you have to be prepared and willing to have the etiquette enough to say that you're going to follow this person's lead. You're now entering a place where you're in their space and as a new experience for you. Treat it as a new experience for you. You don't have to treat them like a stranger, but to treat the experience that you're walking into as a new experience to you. Because the thing about etiquette is, don't start cussing at the table. Make sure your hands are clean and washed. Make sure that you're not just hovering over people or grabbing over people and in their plates and stuff like that. And if you're really old school, don't have your elbows on the table. Don't just pick up things with your bare hands. But is that wrong all the time? See, the thing about etiquette is it changes where you are. Depending on how your family demographics or your community or cultural demographics go, it may be okay to actually eat your bare hands. Now, that's not to say it's okay to just grab at food that's meant for the whole table and with your bare hands. You might still use some sort of serving utensil. But for some foods and some cultures, you don't worry about cutlery. You don't worry about silverware. It depends on where you are. See, if you grew up in a community where you've even been given all this rhetoric about tables and place settings, has to have on one side, always on one side or the other, always exactly in the same place, your spoons, your forks, and your knives. There's things that should never ever change when it comes to a certain textbook etiquette. But when you get into the real world, which is your world, that's the real world we're talking about. So we're not just talking about a certain class of people and just giving you their name to go for it at. No, the real world will always be the world that you actually inhabit. And so you go through all these things, you learn all these things, you see the diagrams. I mean, it's that sophisticated that you have to see a diagram. And where the napkins have to be, where the cup should always be placed. All these things for something that you may or may not ever experience, or you may experience one time or another. So you know what a plate is, you know what a saucer is, you know what a knife, a fork, a spoon is. All these things, there are not foreign things to you, but there may not be things that you use all the time. Now, when you see a layout like this, that sophisticated, all-out layout, usually for certain events, like maybe weddings or a fancy restaurant, where that's basically the ambiance that you're paying for as well. So they're not just going to give you the type of place setting that you have at home. No, they're going to raise their game by showing you the full-scale etiquette. So this may or may not happen for you irregardless of what your typical real world etiquette is as far as eating and being at the table. So your real world etiquette, you may be lucky if you just had one fork, one spoon, and one knife in your cutlery jar, because you might live alone or you might just don't care. And so as long as you're not having to physically eat everything with your hands, you'll figure you're the perfect example of etiquette. You've washed your hands before you started eating. You're going to wash your hands after you eat. You're going to use your fork or spoon or knife maybe for actual correlated things. It's not a perfect science to these things. That's why I wanted to start with the general etiquette of understanding and knowing about the differences around us. Like I said, understanding and respectfully going into a practice. If you're breaking bread with someone, they should be hopefully important enough for you to just give a few moments out of your time to have a free meal, enjoy this person's company, and do so just a little differently than you typically would at home. That's the only thing about it. But the thing is, that will change because the sense of etiquette will be different depending on whatever household you go to. Like, for example, going back to the whole thing about doing cheers when you're about to have a drink with someone. Just a plain drink, but you want to be festive. And it can even go as far as your actual facial expressions. Now, when I was talking about being respectful and mindful about the different ways in which people interact with their food and at their own dining table, we're talking about etiquette, which means we're talking about not having too strange of a face expression when it comes to something you may feel that is abnormal to you or just different than what you're usually used to. So we consider that etiquette just to not have a peculiar looking expression that may show some sign of disrespect. But when you go to somewhere like Germany and they're doing a lovely cheers with their drinks, you're expected to look at them in the eye. So the whole thing about facial expression changed. The etiquette now is to use your face. Now the thing about etiquette in this place, and even in Italy, you have to use your face. You don't have to pull a face, but you do have to give them direct eye contact, because that is considered as a sign of respect. To give them eye contact when you're raising your glasses up together in a cheers and drink. So it's not just about going Prost. It's about also being mindful enough to hold the eye contact long enough to make that drink connection before you actually take a sip of your drink. And this is the etiquette there. So you really never know what is expected or what is accepted. So when we're talking about etiquette, it's a plethora of things and a plethora of variants when it comes to etiquette. And our quest for originality, we tend to be more creatures of habit than I think we want to admit or notice. And even with that, there are these variants. So we have to pull ourselves back and to accept the things that we don't understand sometimes. So even for like a simple joke, it wouldn't be uncommon being someone from the States and the South for someone to make some corny little joke about putting a fork in something, as in to put an end to a discussion while they're at the dinner table, and hence they would probably literally actually put a fork in some food standing straight up. But let's say now you're eating with someone else and you've been encouraged to eat with chopsticks just because everyone else is, or you say you'd give it a try. Whatever the sentiment, the statement was, whatever the need this person felt to imitate this certain action in which they are putting some sort of eating instrument directly into the food and leaving it straight up. Now for a fork, neither here or there. You can just but if you're doing this with chopsticks at a table with people of Asian descent, do not do this. It probably wasn't a good idea to recreate that moment with the fork in the first place. It's really not going to be a good show of etiquette. Because chopsticks sticking straight up in the Asian culture are reminiscent of incense, which is usually burnt through death and funerals. So, we don't want to go from the point of wishing someone happy eating, bon appetit, to going to a reenactment of something that represents death. You don't want to start from a happy disposition to something that's reminiscent of a grim disposition. And something that may seem so simple to you, it doesn't matter. Your table has now changed. So now your etiquette now has to change. This shouldn't be a big change, but if you don't know and you do something like this because it seems, oh well, it's not oh well. and it probably won't be to your host as well. It depends on how they feel about it or how forgiving they are. Because people do understand that certain things are not understood by all. But again, a lot of times, like I said, when we have our social interactions in a group setting with our different ways of being, we have a way of just saying, oh, it's neither here or there, because we're out in the public where there's even more people around us, eating around us with different ways. And so nobody's trying to, in a show of etiquette, nobody's trying to push any way of being down anyone else's throat. So they're not being anxious or uptight about anything. But when you enter your personal realm, and especially if this personal realm has your ancestors who have brought you up to this way of being, because they have been brought up. This is a generational thing. This is etiquette that has a deep-rooted history. And so you may be eating with someone who may not understand why it was important at all. Why would you do something like that? Stick your chopsticks up in the food and just leave it like that anyway, regardless of how insignificant it may seem to you. Even at someone else's table, especially for an adult, it doesn't seem quite that normal just to stick your utensil into something and just let it stand there. It's more like a bored child actor, someone who's just not interested in their food anymore. Which, across the board, if you're seeing someone not interested in the food, it looks like they're playing with the food or doing something strange with the food, period, regardless of it having a deep meaning or not, it's not, again, not a good show of etiquette, because you've had people who allowed you at their table, who shared their food with you, whether they had it in abundance or just sparingly. They decided that you are fit to be at their table and that you are welcome to be at their table. So why do anything peculiar at their table, which makes them feel like you're not enjoying the food, or makes it feel like you're not appreciative of the food? So etiquette is a very tricky and intricate thing wherever you go. One place, grab your cutlery. Another place, your deity's tongs, aka your fingers. That is what to be used. In all cases, clean hands before and after you eat. You don't want to come to a table with any extra guests on your fingers, on your hands, and you don't want to be actually dragging any food debris around as you go. So these are just things of etiquette and going to the food and appreciation. When it comes to being appreciative for food, some people, some cultures believe your food should be eaten completely, almost to the point as if they hardly even need to wash a dish after you. That's how clean your plate should be, because that shows you that you appreciated the food that they've given you. Some other places, they feel that you should leave a bit on your plate. Because this is not a show that said that you didn't enjoy your food completely or that you're no longer interested in it. This shows you've had so much food. Etiquette is not also just about sitting there and taking it. I also said traditions get a bad rap because people believe they're just something that are set in stone, cement down so deep that its carving reaches the earth's mantle. It's not that way all the time. Now, in order to be respectful, especially if you got maybe the older generations, they might be it's more insistent about things. But like I said, there's all different reasons sometimes why you may have to make certain adjustments to your traditions, but your traditions will still have that value. And so I think people get so set in their ways that they think in order for it to be a tradition and never has to change, or in order to have a sense of etiquette means you have to be basically a yes man. And that is not necessarily true. You just have to be genuine and mannerable and respectful. That's it. Because there will always be things that we will be at odds with. And when I mean at odds too, I don't mean necessarily fisticuffs. It doesn't have to be confrontational. It's just that someone has one set of taste buds, somebody has another set of taste buds. And this could be within the same community, within the same family, within the same faith. Like I said, the human body is a very veritable type thing. Not only just from one person versus another, but for each and every individual's time period versus another as well. So it's not to, of all the things that we expect when it comes to etiquettes and being mannerable and interacting with each other in a social place or a business place, whatever type of place where you're coming together, having to either walk past each other or greet each other or work alongside each other, those expectations may be a bit more set and a bit more concrete because they usually don't vary much worldwide. They typically don't vary much. When you hear the word manners and respect, you basically are encountering, no matter what language you speak, no matter where you are, you basically, the expectation to encounter a situation and with you interact with someone else and not be offended or disrespected. And so most of the times a show of respect is not that much different no matter where you go. Now there will be certain points and things that you may not know about, like don't have your chopsticks sticking straight up in your food or stuff like that. But for the most part, respect is respect, manners are manners, and consideration is consideration. We're not so different that we are unaware when hurt arises, or we're not so different that we are unaware when cheerfulness and glee is present in someone's expression or body. So it doesn't have to be that difficult. But even with all that said, we are very different. And so the things that we accept or the things that we like will vary.
¿Cómo estás? Vamos. I'm ready. Off the host, over roast, eyes on me, that's right, Prost. Cutlery like a fleet, I think it's time. Bon appetit. Have no fear, just switch gears, all hands in. That's right, cheers. Was the food to your taste on that plate? I see no waste with your food, please don't play. Have those chopsticks the right way, yeah. There may be shades of gray, but listen up, your host knows the way, so just please enjoy your stay. I believe that's what you say. Oh, well, scran. Thank you, ma'am. Trying to get the perfect fit through my air of etiquette. Oh, for real, I'm in the know. Not too bad for my first go. I see my plate, I can't wait. Oh, this food food's a bitter fate. Oh, please hesitate before the food meets your face. Say Bismillah, now of grace. You're in a special place in which we all can relate. It's our etiquette, our decision. We respect all plate and traditions.
Thank you again for joining us for another week. We hope to see you again next time. Bye bye.